do you feel like has been given to you? Really, in your life, do you feel like you're someone with abundance or someone who has little? Now, I know I come to you tonight kind of haughtily. You know, I've got my nice treasures behind me. I've got my 1991 Ford Ranger, and you think, who is this guy to come over here and talk about riches while he is in front of such a audacious treasure? But in truth, setting aside all the material items around us, when we actually examine our lives, God has given us tremendous wealth. And it's wealth that oftentimes we can't put our finger on. When we look to the Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 12, verse 48, Jesus teaches, "Whomsoever much has been given, much shall also be expected." Now, when we actually step ourselves a little bit further back and look at chapter 12 in whole, we find that Jesus is teaching this in the middle of a parable about servants. Now, you might look at a house, if you were to see a great mansion, and you would think the master of that house was sure to be the one who had been given so much. But yet Jesus is teaching about the servants there in that mansion, that much has been given to them. And even though they may not recognize it at first, they too are in possession of great power, of great responsibility. You see, all of us, by way of natural law, being born in the image of God, being born as a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve, we have something unique deep within our DNA. Deep within the human spirit is this ability to reflect God. This ability to go out and think, to love, to reason, to interact with the world, and navigate this travail with a unique set of things. God has given us treasures, miraculous things. And when we read there in Luke 12:48, when Jesus says, "Whomsoever much is given, much shall be expected, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked." We are called here in this life to reflect God's goodness. You look there in the book of Esther, and there's that pivotal moment in the beginning of chapter 5 where she steps into her royal robes, and she really becomes the queen of this massive empire. Well, you know what? Each and every one of us, we are meant to reflect God's image, and it's woven into our DNA to actually be creatures of dominion, to be creatures who go out and subdue and rule over the earth. Now, oftentimes we pervert that innate design to be something tyrannical, where we lord ourselves over our neighbor and do wicked and evil things. But in truth, that calling is meant to be something which is actually inspirational. And I don't mean that like the cheap feel-good books which try to pull us up from a low moment in life. I mean that from the eternal transcendental truths of God's creation. In all moments of life, high or low, we are meant to be reflecting God's goodness, and we are meant to be people who are more like Nehemiah or Queen Esther, who step into the gap, who step into the void that they might deliver the people entrusted to them. That people might look at them and not see just another worldly tyrant, not someone who's just here for a momentary sensation or even to pick up themselves personally, but they're here to step into a kingdom which is larger than anything which we might just lay our finger on here or there. It's larger than something like a 1991 Ford Ranger, which has a reasonable size bed for its, category, but nonetheless, God's kingdom has something much more vast. I feel like I'm doing a bad job with the Ford Ranger jokes. Maybe that's not my personality. I don't know. But if we look to Paradise Lost, my favorite work of fiction out there, John Milton writes, and he writes of Adam talking to God, he said, "Did I request thee, Maker, from my clay to mold me man? Did I solicit thee, that from my darkness to promote me?" And that line, it really does capture the fallen spirit of humanity. Because we oftentimes wake up and say, God, I didn't ask to be born here. I didn't sign the agreement of life. I don't care that you've left me out here to be a servant of your great house. I'm going to do what I want to. That's what you find going on there in that parable in Luke 12. The master goes away, leaving his servants in charge of the house. And what are they to do? Are they to say, "Oh, the master's been gone a while. Maybe we'll have a big party in his house and plunder all of his goods"? "Oh, the master's been gone a while. I'm a high-ranking servant. Therefore, I will treat my lower servants as if they are garbage and do menacing, wicked things upon them." Or maybe they say, "The master is not coming home. We won't leave a light out for him. We will go back and enjoy our beds and just be passive and sit around and do our own thing. He's the master anyways. If he was going to come home, he should have gave us a more specific schedule." No, much has been given to the servants. They are to use their minds, reasoning, thinking, making sure they keep a light out there that the master will see them when he comes home. Standing there at the gate, ready to bring him in so that everything in the house can snap back together as if the master was never even away. Much has been given to us here in this life, and we are to do great things with it. We did not ask to be born, nor under what circumstances. But yet, creation demands of us an innate loyalty. By natural law, God asks loyalty to us. Right now in our world, it's popular for people to say they are without God, though it's becoming less so as our culture becomes less and less Christian and even further away from having arguments about Christianity. You find people pretending as if they have no religion, no belief system. But, of course, that's not the case. They really do have a belief system, and they're going to impose it on you. But people oftentimes say, I didn't ask to be part of God's creation, so therefore I have nothing to do with God's law. In America, a lot of times that shows up as, I didn't ask to be a Christian, therefore I believe I can have the First Amendment, free speech without caring about people's souls or understanding that the logic of free speech comes from Jesus seeing a man called Matthew and saying he's not a tax collector, he's not a sinner, but he's a unique man who has something unique to say. He has his own tongue. He is worthy as a creature made in my image. Or Jesus seeing a Samaritan woman saying, that woman, despite the great sins in her past, of which she really is guilty, I want to forgive her and redeem her and pull her back to my kingdom so that she might be restored. She has a unique voice that is valuable. All of these collective mentalities which view people as groups, as the most superficial characteristic, none of these things can truly appreciate the human soul, and therefore there will never be a need for freedom of speech within them. There will always be these phony arguments about hate speech and all this garbage, which is ultimately just meant to suppress truth and to keep people from being valued in the way that God designed us to be valued. As creatures, men and women created in His image, whom much has been given. Our world wants us to think that it's all the outside circumstances which causes someone to succeed or fail. We kind of have this modern idea that pulling yourself up from your bootstraps is just an American construct that needs to go away, but it's not true. It actually goes all the way back to God speaking with Cain there in Genesis 4, where God says, if you do well, will you not be accepted? A modern world doesn't want to encourage people to do well. Why? Because it doesn't want everyone out there to know God has actually given you much. You see, the message I have right now is not just here to beat up on the wicked paganism, the spirit of the age which has seized our culture, though, of course, I'm here to do that as well. No, my point is to remind us that God has given you much in your life. And that's not just something to make you feel a little warm and fuzzy on the inside. In fact, it may spook you a little bit because it means there's much responsibility placed on you. You have to step into the gap. You have to step into the void. This last week, I was invited to share a message with a local high school, and I did a version of this message from Luke 12:48, and then I coupled it into Job 38, which I'll do here in a moment. And I was telling the young men, I said, much is expected of you, much power has been given to you. You have to give an answer for that power. You have to do something with it. And the day after I gave them this sermon, they went and they played. They won their playoff game, but one of the players broke his leg. When much power is given to you, sometimes you go and step in the gap and you do get your leg broken. Sometimes you get maimed. Sometimes you don't even come out of that battle alive, but instead return to the master there in that moment. Much is given to us. We have to prepare the way for God's kingdom. We have to prepare the way that our children and their generations might be able to walk in the good, the true, and the beautiful as it was handed to us. Hell, that nether gloom beneath all worlds, wants us to believe that there is no innate loyalty, and that if there were, that there is this innate calling where you should honor your parents. And I don't just mean doing what they say, but also honor the Christian faith that it was handed down through you, to honor the culture that was handed down to you and build up the godly things within it and throw away the ungodly things which have worked evil in it. The idea that we would actually build up righteous traditions and honor them, the world wants to tell us that that's a burden that should be discarded, that you have no loyalty to anything. You didn't ask to be born, therefore you shouldn't give a rip about those traditions. But that's just a clever poison to get you lured into hell. to get you lured into suffering. And we should never forget, there are those who want to live in hell, and there are those who want to make hell. And as Lucifer even says there in Paradise Lost, heaven and hell are a thing of the mind. One can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. And of course, his ultimate goal is to reign in hell as if it were heaven. But this innate charge of loyalty, and what I mean when I say that is God expects you to be loyal to Him just by being born. You've been given the breath of life. How about pay a little homage to the one who gave you that breath of life? This charge of innate loyalty, it's not a curse like the world wants you to think. It's actually a blessing. And it is indeed the very agreement of life. You didn't sign up for it. You never clamped your name on it like a nice little tag. But you know what? It is the agreement of life. There in the book of Job, chapter 38, we are reminded that God is not only personal and friendly, though there is certainly a lot of truth brought to us, seeing that Jesus manifests as man. But God is also sovereign. God is eternal. God is transcendent. God is dangerous. And what we see in Job chapter 38, verses 1 through 3 is the Lord God shows up in a violent storm. Job 38:1 reads, "And then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is it that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up thy loins like a man, and prepare to answer me, because I demand it of you." We must all give an answer for everything we do. We must decide how we're going to use the great power, the great responsibility that has been handed over to us. Life always demands us give an answer. I work on the old Ford Ranger there. Been tinkering around with the four-wheel drive in it, trying to get it converted over to manual four-wheel drive where you lock in the wheels there. Works a little bit better than the automatic hubs. And, you know, I took the wheel apart and pulled out the socket there, and there's some missing parts. Now, I could have just stuck the hub on there and continued driving it, but it wouldn't have ever worked. I have to give an answer. Everything we do demands an answer. We can try to put things back together halfway and just cover up the injuries, the maladies, but it's not ever going to give us the solution we want. You know, another example, the shifter in the old truck back there, it had come loose. And it's a 5-speed, and it got to a point where you would shift through the gears and the shifter would pop off. You know, you got to give an answer for that. Are you going to fix it? Or are you just going to take some electrical tape and try to get that shifter attached tighter like one of the previous owners had done? No, I had to sit inside and fabricate another one there on the 3D printer. When it comes to our spiritual lives, we oftentimes want to do that. We want to just put the wheel back on and hide the broken hub. We want to just put a little bit of electrical tape around, ourselves so that we can shift through the gears of life without any issues. But in truth, we will have to give an answer. You can't do that for very long. Our culture's been heavily afflicted because a lot of the people we have given power over to, we've given authority to within our institutions, they don't want to fight the battles which this hour demands. They don't want to rise to the occasion of having to make difficult decisions. They don't want to have to do the research to find out what's really going on with things like the virus, which shall not be named. They don't want to have to know the truth because then they might have to make a dangerous and risky decision, and if they're wrong, they might lose everything. You see, we in life, we like being given much, but we don't like the responsibility that comes with it. But if we want to step into the good, the true, and the beautiful, or as Philippians 4:8 reminds us, into all that is true, all that is true, all that is noble, all that is just, all that is pure, all that is beautiful, anything which is good, commendable, and virtuous, worthy of praise, if we want to step into those things, then we're going to have to recognize how much God has given us. You might think you're a mere, servant, somebody who's just a low-born peasant who may not have a lot, but this is not the case. All of us, every creature made in the image of God, every son of Adam and daughter of Eve has been given a tremendous amount of power. If you're listening to this, you have been given something great from God. And God did not ask if you wanted it. God did not ask if you might like this hour. Yet here we are, here you are. God has brought us to this moment. Wherefore, to firmness we might stand, and to His gospel we might radiate. The good Lord has given us many talents, many more than we often realize. We ultimately will be called before God there at the hour of judgment, but even in the smaller events of life, those smaller moments, we do find ourselves forced to give an answer. So as I wrap up this very brief sermon, are you prepared to give thy answer? To gird up thy loins like a man and stand before God, not willing to shirk any responsibility, not willing to abdicate the power given to you and stick your head in the grass and say, no, I don't want to hear it, I just don't want to hear it? Are you going to be someone who likes to confuse, inveigle, and obfuscate so that you never have to answer the real question? And the most gross things that goes on in our world is it seems all of our institutions are given over to platitudes, cheap talk, and words that have no meaning. Oh, we're really good at avoiding the honest questions and always being technical and meticulous while never saying a thing. But are we willing to speak as God designed us to speak, to be men and women of truth, to go out to the world with forgiveness, repentance, and hope, standing against the great enemies of the faith, hoping too that they may come to know the Lord? Are we willing to cast out the evil? Are we willing to build up our families? With that, thank you for joining me. I'm Pastor J. Dylan Proctor. May God love you and have a blessed day.